Welcome to the Robeytech step-by-step gaming PC building video. It's a guide focused on helping you build an amazing gaming PC with a variety of options depending on your gaming PC needs. Not only do we have a great baseline of a build powered by the current gaming CPU king, the Ryzen 7 9800X3D, but this build guide will show you less expensive options and a variety of both AMD and Nvidia GPUs to help you maximize your budget and walk away with a PC that is ultimately best for you. And yes, I know many of you will ask, yes, you can use this as a gaming/streaming PC or even as an editing rig for your videos. Now we know that each person's needs are different, and we wanted to give you a guide that can be adaptable to your needs. So if you head on over to robeytech.com/step-by-step, you will see a variety of different options and price points for this build featuring different CPUs and GPUs that allow you to choose the parts that fit your budget for your preferences. Now on the website, you get full details on gaming performance, thermals, and more. And hopefully this results in you building a PC that does just what you need it to do at a price you're happy with. Now, we are constantly updating it with new games and part options as they make sense. Now, how does this guide work? Well, we made this video to give you a full set of step-by-step instructions that in the end result in a fully functioning gaming PC. Feel free to pause, rewind, skip ahead, or skip backwards to your heart's content. We will show you zoomed in shots of connections, detailed instructions for installing each part, and even a guide on how to cable manage. We try to make this the most comprehensive step-by-step PC build guide we could. If you see anything we missed or we should add, please put it down in the comments below. But enough about me talking about a PC build guide, let's get to the actual building. So before we put all of these parts here inside of this chassis, let's get to what you actually need to build a PC. First thing, nice big open space like a table, preferably on some place that isn't carpet just to reduce static. It's not as big of a deal as it used to be, but again, we don't want to insert any risk if we can. Now, in terms of the tools themselves, the things that are absolutely necessary is a standard Phillips type screwdriver, preferably magnetic, which is really, really nice. So if you drop anything or when it holds onto screws, this is going to be invaluable. And getting a good one is just gonna make your life a whole lot easier. The second thing that is absolutely necessary is a box cutter, knife, something like that, because you're gonna have a ton of packages to open up. And the other thing too is I will say precision when opening things up is going to be really, really nice so you don't damage any of the components. Now we're gonna talk about some optional things, and the reason that they get optional is they will make it easier, but if you're trying to not spend your budget on a bunch of little extra components, you don't necessarily have to, but they definitely will make the experience better. First and foremost, zip ties and a zip tie basically snip. Now, most of the cases, stuff like that, they'll have like Velcro strips, stuff like that that you can use to do your cable management, but this just makes it a whole lot easier, and these are pretty inexpensive. The reason for this is that when you basically snip the ends of the zip ties, you want to get right up in there. So having a nice set of these, and I mean, they're like $3, $4, $5, $7, ends up basically just making sure it's precise and you don't necessarily cut any wires. Some people do it with scissors, not necessarily a strong recommendation. Another optional thing is the iFixit kit. Now you'll see this from Jay, or if you're watching any of these things, the main reason for the iFixit kit is when I open this up, you'll actually see that there's some very small screwdrivers. The nice small Phillips head and options here, there are gonna be things like M.2 screws, etc., that sometimes having like a smaller screw head ends up being a little bit easier, but for the most part, we'll be able to do everything with just your standard Phillips screwdriver. Next thing, and this is very optional, this is a just in case. This is thermal paste, which we use Noctua NTH1, and we have what's called a thermal paste spreader. It's like a little spatula. You know, it's really basically for being able to spread thermal paste if you want to. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that part. The last thing down here is that if you end up making a mistake with your cooler, you have paper towels or isopropyl alcohol, or you can get little ethyl alcohol wipes that allow you to basically clean the surface of the cooler and the CPU. Now you might be listening to this going, Robey, that doesn't make any sense. It will when we get to that part, but this is kind of potentially everything you would need if you wanted to go all in and be a pro PC builder like me. But for the most part, really, if it's basic, it's literally this, and that's kind of it. So let's start with the motherboard. We're using a B650 full ATX motherboard for this, but before we kind of go through it, we're gonna open it and I'm gonna give you a tour. The main reason for that is that we really want you to have an idea of what each part is, so as we start to reference it later on in the video and you see it, it'll start to make a little bit of sense. So let's pop this open. Now we'll go through all of the parts that you'll need later on, but for now, let's just go ahead and open up the Mobo. The one thing I will say, sometimes it has a piece of tape, this one does not, but you want to take good care of the anti-static bag, just in case you end up having an issue and you need to return it for warranty repair or RMA. You just want to make sure that this thing is 100% protected should you need to mail it back, just for warranty issues. Now the other thing I will say is what I'll do is I'll take everything that's inside of this, which in this case is the Wi-Fi radio antenna and all that stuff, and I'll stick it separately. And then the one thing to remember about your motherboard box is everything that's extra you're going to want to put inside of the Mobo box. Main reason being is you want a central location to store all your extra cables and stuff. So should you need to find them later on, if you upgrade or change stuff, all that stuff is inside the box and easy for you to get back to. So this is our very beautiful motherboard. Now, I just want to go through and give you a tour of all of the things that are in here. Starting here in the center, this is our AMD AM5 socket. So the AM5 socket is where we're going to stick the CPU. I'm going to pop it open. You can see it's got a bunch of pins inside of it. There's also a couple of other things that are inside of it that are important, but the most important thing is there's a little arrow that's going to be important when we show the installation a little bit later on, and we'll get into that when we get to the CPU install. On the outside is a bracket, and this bracket is unique to AMD. What this allows you to do is to mount AIOs and coolers, not used in all cases. In this case, we'll actually be removing it. To right of this, what you see is these are called the RAM slots. You can see they're actually different colors. This is something that's unique about certain level of motherboards. This is kind of a little bit of a higher end one. The light gray is one pair of RAM and the black is a different pair of RAM. And so A2 and B2 is the primary slot we're gonna be sticking RAM in. And there's a little diagram right here that actually shows this. And this is where we know where to basically stick if we're only gonna do 2 RAM slots versus 4 RAM slots in this case. Up here, these are actually fan connections. There's a total of 7 total fan connectors on this motherboard. Also up here, you'll see these little white connections. These are actually your 5-volt ARGB connections, and there's a total of 3 of the 5-volt, and then we have a single 12-volt connections. The only ones we'll have to worry about in this particular build is just the 5-volt ones. Down here, we actually have our 24-pin power connector. Below that, this is our USB 3.2 connector for USB 3, which will be on the top of the PC case itself. Underneath that, we actually have USB-C. Now, one of the things that's super interesting here, you'll see these little gray connections. These gray connections are what are called SATA connections. These are for things like your 2.5 and your 3.5 inch HDDs. We're not going to be using any of them in this build, but if you want to add these as a feature for additional storage, this is where you'll actually connect these up. Down at the bottom, we have a really long set of jumpers, but the only ones we're going to care about are over here on the left-hand side, and these are our front panel connectors. And here in very, very small writing, it actually tells you what they are. This is where we're going to put our power switch, our HDD switch, our power plus and minus. All of this stuff connects right here. To the left of this is actually what are called USB connections. These are for internal USB things like AIOs, sometimes screens, stuff like that. Here, none of those in this build, but it's cool to see you actually have 2 expansion slots should you actually need it. Now, the other thing we're going to jump over that we really actually only care about is right here. This is your HD audio connection. Now, we jump up here, we'll actually have a number of what are called PCIe slots. We have a by 16. This is a Gen 4, and then we have a by 1 and a by 4. These are for things like expansion, things like capture cards, audio cards, and underneath this right here, we actually have M.2 slots. Now, you'll see these a little bit later on when we install them. This is where we're going to install our NVMe M.2 SSD. So these are typically what now most folks use. You can get up to 8 terabytes in these things, and they have 2210 and 2280, but we'll be using what are called 2280 or 80 millimeter long M.2s. Then we have this giant thing right here. This is your VRM. This is your heat sink for dissipating energy that basically goes into your CPU. And up here, you'll actually see a couple of connections. These are called EPS CPU connections. Now in this case, we have a 4 and an 8 pin. We'll only be plugging in the 8 pin. This is 4 pin is for usually what is called LN2 or liquid helium overclocking. Now I'm going to pop over and just show you a little bit about the I/O. Down here, this is your 5.1 audio. You can see here that you actually have all of the different rear, line out, line in, all that sort of stuff. This is for plugging in your Wi-Fi antenna. You have a 2.5 gig Ethernet port, and then you'll have a number of USB 3 and then USB-A connections, and then you have 2 USB-C connections as well, which is actually really awesome. If your CPU, which in our case does, does have a integrated iGPU, you have DisplayPort and HDMI. So anyway, that's all of the connections that we have on this. One thing we're gonna do really quick before we go too far, we're just gonna peel our one peel that's on here, our IO shield peel. I also want to point out here, right here in the center, this is actually a coin battery. It's a BIOS battery. Your BIOS is essentially what stores all of your settings for your motherboard. So if you ever have an issue where you need to reset the motherboard, pulling this battery would actually do that, and then you'll end up with fresh settings. And then the last thing is right under here, this little tough icon is actually your B650 chipset. If you ever wonder where the brain of your motherboard is, it's actually underneath. Okay, so I wanted to go through really quick the things that are included in the motherboard and what you may need for the installation beyond what we may show in the guide. Now, first and foremost, the first thing I'm going to tell you guys about is the guidebook or the instruction book. The good thing about this is it actually has all of the reference material for like what connections are and stuff like that. So if you ever get confused, it's always a good thing to just have on hand for referencing. Now, we're going to show things like out of this during the guide, and of course we're going to have zoomed in shots, but if you need an additional just help, this is always a good thing to have around, and I'm really glad to give you a physical copy. Now, if you're going to be using non-standard M.2s, which for this particular video we're not going to be using, but if you are like a 2210 or a 2260, they have also included additional thermal pads. So should this be an issue to cover screw holes if you're going to remove them, we're not going to be showing any of that in the guide, but I do want to make sure that you know that and are aware that they're in there, as well as some smaller standoffs. So should you need to do something that's longer like 2210 or something that's shorter like 2280, if you don't understand what that means more than likely you don't have to worry about it. But for this guide, we're not going to, but that's what these are for right here. Now, I did want to show you this. This is your Wi-Fi antenna. And this is if you're going to use Wi-Fi in your build and not going to be plugging it into an actual physical port, this is the antenna you plug into. It's got two connectors. They connect right into the gold pegs at the very end of your motherboard on the IO shield. Really, really straightforward, and this is how you actually get signal. The last thing, and again, not covered in this guide, but if you are going to have like 2.5 or 3.5 inch hard drives, these are the SATA cables to plug it in. We showed you the SATA connections and talked about them. We were doing the overview of the motherboard, but that's what these are for. For this guide, the only thing you actually really need though, and it'd just be good to have available, is your motherboard manual. Okay, so now it's time to install our Ryzen 7 9800X3D. Now, if you chose a different Ryzen CPU, don't worry, the installation is going to be exactly the same. The box may be a little bit thicker or whatever, but the only thing that we need outside of this is the CPU itself. So let's get this open. Now, the only thing that you need outside of the box is this little plastic tray. It has your CPU, it has a sticker, which you're not gonna need. Now, when we open this, the only thing you're gonna wanna do is you wanna grab the CPU from the edges, not from touching the bottom or the top. Now, the top is what's called the IHS, or it's the integrated heat spreader. Touching this isn't a big deal, but on the other side is the LAN grid array, and these are where the pins that are inside of the basically the CPU socket actually touch the CPU. And touching these, not a good idea. So again, when we open this up, you want to grip from the side or from the top to be able to pull this out. So let's go ahead and get it out, and we'll show you the installation. So as you can see, I'm just going to literally grab it from the side. Just took it outside, which is actually pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to basically push down on this, and then we're just going to use the corner to lift up. Now, on the CPU, there's actually a little arrow in the top left-hand corner, and then you'll also see an arrow in the top left-hand corner of the cover. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to line up that arrow so you can read the AMD Ryzen as it's facing towards you, just like normal. You're just going to set it in the socket. You can see the two arrows align. You're just going to pull it down, and then make sure it grips, push, and push under, and then this just pops right off. Okay, well, our CPU's installed, so probably you're getting over your jitters and ready to jump to the next part. This time we're going to install our G.Skill Triton Z5 Neo RGB. Now, if you chose a larger kit or whatever it is, totally fine. It's going to be the exact same installation process, so let's get this open and get this installed. What we're going to do is you basically open it like this, put all the sticker and stuff out of the way, and you just flip it over, drop it like waffles. Now, if you want to stick the sticker on your chassis, you absolutely can. I just kind of keep mine in the box, or in this case, I put it in the Mobo box, so if at some point in time I'm feeling like adding a sticker, which adds an additional 10 to 15 frames to your games, I might do that, you know, if it's just not running all that well. Just kidding, that doesn't add frames. Time to get these into the motherboard. Now, the slots we care about are the light gray slots. These are A2 and B2. only thing we're gonna do right now is the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna unlatch these two slots. Now, what you're gonna do is you're actually gonna notice on the PCB, which is this gold pin part, it's called a printed circuit board, there's a little line in the center, right? A little gap. And you'll actually see when you line it up like this, that this gap lines up with the silver gap in the center of the DIMM slot. And then with the sticker facing towards the CPU, just gonna slot it in just like this. You're just gonna push down with both thumbs, make sure you get a solid click, and this is locked all the way in. And the same thing, again, just line it up, slot it in, sticker towards the CPU. Nice solid push, and just make sure it's locked in. Okay, next up, we're gonna be installing our NVMe drive. Now, if you have more than one, or you're using a different size, the installation is gonna be the same. If you are gonna do more than one, you're gonna have to open the additional M.2 slots, which we showed earlier, and you can follow the same installation instructions to get those installed. But let's get this open and get this into the build. No sticker or anything cool in this one, so the only thing that I would say is just NVMe sometimes, not that there's usually an issue with them, but if you're ever worried about having to send them back for NVMe for like a replacement or whatever it was, keeping the box can always be a good idea, and they're nice small boxes. I did say that one of these is optional, but because of these particular motherboards, using a standard screwdriver to open up the M.2 sockets can be a little bit rough. So if it doesn't work, you may need to go find a smaller screwdriver versus doing something like an iFixit kit. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take this and we're gonna remove this top slot M.2 cover. There's two screws, just remove them. They are captive, so they're not gonna come all the way out. Now on the other side, the thing that's super key is there actually is a cover over the thermal pad for the M.2. You're gonna wanna peel this right away. Now, if you're gonna install additional M.2s, there are additional thermal pads on this one as well, so make sure that you peel those before you install your M.2. Okay, next what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our M.2. There's a little slot here for the PCB again, and then you'll notice in the connector, there's also a little slot. You just wanna line those up, and you're gonna literally just pop it in. You'll know that it's in because it acts like a little diving board. Here, you'll see a little latch. All you're gonna do is push it and then twist it, and it'll hold it down. Then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna put the cover back on and screw it in. Okay guys, well now all of our core components are in, so now we get to focus on the cooling. In this case, we're using the Phantom Spirit 120 SE ARGB. Now this will cool everything from the 9800X3D that we're putting in here, all the way down to the other options we have listed in the guide over at robeytech.com/step-by-step. So let's go ahead and open this up and see what's inside of the box. We're gonna lay it down like this. And here at the back, you're just gonna be able to lift it up, pops right open. Grab this little cardboard piece, just get it out of the way. Now inside of the box, you basically have the air cooler and the accessories. Pull this all out, just like so. Just gonna grab our fans, then we're just gonna push this out of the way because we don't need it anymore. So inside of the box, you're gonna find your two fans that we're gonna install onto the air cooler. You're also gonna find your air cooler itself with its little box of accessories, your installation instructions, which are actually gonna be helpful. And then inside of the accessories box, you're gonna find a whole lot of stuff. You're gonna find installation for AM4 or AMD, Intel, and then also another Intel installation. So those are gonna be there. You're going to find your brackets, your mounting brackets for Intel and AMD, as well as thermal paste. You're gonna find a fan splitter. You're going to find two more Intel back plates, and then you're going to find fan mounts that allow you to mount your fans to the actual air cooler. Now, before we install our cooler, we're gonna do something a little bit different. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and install our splitter for the fans onto the motherboard, just because the cooler can actually make it a little harder to reach. So let's go ahead and install that really quick. At the very top here, you'll see 3 fan connections, and one of them is light gray. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take this fan splitter and you're just gonna connect it right into the light gray spot, just like that. Okay, next step, guys, is what we're gonna do is we're going to go ahead and replace our stock AMD brackets with the brackets that we need for the Thermalright air cooler. So first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna remove these top brackets. The screws are gonna be a little bit tight. Just remove the screws all up. Now, one thing that I love to do, because you never know when you might need these brackets again, say for instance you decide to go to an AIO, is remember how I told you to keep the static bag for your Mobo? What I would do is basically, once you're done removing these, go ahead and place them right inside of that Mobo bag, so that way you've got them stored in a safe place, so if you ever need to find them again or use them again, you have them. And then also, if you're gonna return it for a RMA or a warranty issue, you have to put those brackets back on. So now what we're gonna do is you're gonna take these little red standoffs, and what you're gonna do is you're gonna put them on each one of the little corners. I have a tendency to flip them over just to find like the tightest fit. Sometimes they fit the same. The tighter they are, the better they are, they're gonna kind of stay in place. Then, next thing what you're gonna do is you're gonna take these, having them point towards the center of the CPU. I'm gonna set it down. Then you're gonna take these screws, then you're just gonna screw it tight. Then same process at the top. Grab a screw. This is where a magnetic screwdriver ends up being helpful. Kind of set it in there, tighten it all the way down. Okay, so now it's time to do the thermal paste. And luckily, the Thermalright stuff comes with the air cooler, but if you wanted to use your own thermal paste like the Noctua NTH2 or the NTH1, that's completely fine. I'm gonna show you using the standard thermal paste that comes with the cooler just to make it a little bit easier. So we're gonna do what's called the 9-dot method. Since this doesn't come with a spatula, we're not gonna spread it. So that way we're gonna make sure we get entire coverage of the IHS. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this. It's 1, 2, 3 at the top, and then 3 smaller dots in the middle, same dots for all of them, and then 3 more at the bottom, just like that. Okay, now it's time to actually install the cooler, but warning, you're seeing red flashes on the screen. This is a very important part. We need to make sure that we peel this sticker off of the cold plate at the bottom. Okay, now, for placing this on the CPU, the one thing you're gonna wanna make sure is that the Thermalright is pointed to the right side towards the RAM. Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna see there's these 2 little screws that align with these pegs on here. You're just gonna wanna put those right on top and screw it down. Is you're gonna start each screw, so make sure it catches, screw it like 3 times, and go to the other side, screw it 3 times, and then you're just gonna go back and forth, screwing it 3 times at a time. Now when you get to the end, you'll feel it stop. You don't need to over tighten it, just like that. To get the fans prepared, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove all the twisty ties. Like I said, just straighten out all the cables, make sure they're all the way straight. Now what you're gonna do is with your cables down at the bottom, take 2 of these clips, 1 for each fan, clip them on the edges just like that, and they'll grip pretty well, which is nice. Same thing on the other side. And then what you're gonna do is gonna take your cable, push it down, and then have the fan touch all the way to the RAM. So you're just gonna clip it in, and then make sure that your cable is all the way taut. And then like checking to make sure, that it's nice and flush. Then for the second fan, make sure the cables are down in the bottom right-hand corner. Put your fan grippers on. I don't know if they have an official name. I'm gonna call them fan grippers. It's now copyrighted. Now this one is a little bit tricky because you just gotta make sure the cables don't get stuck. Loose hands, right? Making sure that they're pulling on the cables at the same time. Slowly navigate it down. Once it's down, you wanna make sure it's even with the other fan. And then you're gonna do the same thing. Just pull back and lock in. And one thing just to be cognizant of, guys, is notice that I've routed the cables through the little slot up here by the VRM. So just gonna take some work, but just so you don't get the cable stuck in the VRM. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna get all the connections for the air cooler kind of squared away. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take these, I'm gonna grab the ones just for the air cooler, which are just, so make sure that you don't grab the extensions down below. And we're gonna take a zip tie and zip tie those kind of as far back as you can. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to take the 2 fan cables here, which is we've already connected to the Mobo, and we're going to be putting them inside of the splitter here. Push them in, there's 1, do the same thing with the other one, there's 2. And those are connected. Last connection before we get this all inside of the case. So we're gonna take our 2 ARGB cables, and then we're gonna take one of them, it doesn't matter which one, and you're gonna take this plastic cover off of it, just like that. And then what we're gonna do is you're gonna take the other one, and you're gonna see there's an arrow on each one of them. You're gonna put the arrow together, and you're gonna make them kiss. And now we have a single daisy-chained ARGB connection coming off of our cooler. We're finally at that part where we take all of the hard work we've done with the motherboard, and we put it inside of the Phanteks XT Pro. Now, I really do love this case. The thing I love about it is 140 millimeter fans. There's just a lot of cold air, which means if you're using everything from a 7600, which is on the cheaper end, if you're deciding to do this build with something inexpensive like that, all the way up to the 9800X3D, it's just bathing that air cooler in air, which keeps the temperatures nice and frosty. And again, you can head over to robeytech.com/step-by-step to see all the thermals and stuff like that for the performance. But let's get into actually getting this prepared. So first and foremost, we're gonna grab these two screws, which are right here on the side. Sometimes they're overly tight, so don't feel bad if you aren't strong enough and you need to use a screwdriver just to loosen them. Now they are captive, so they're not gonna come out. Just gonna open it up. And then what we like to do is actually the safest thing is just to place it inside of the PC box. That way it's just nice and protected and it won't break or anything like that. So for the back one, simple, same thing, two screws. There you go, they're captive, so they don't come all the way out. Just pull. This can be a little bit tricky, has a tendency to get caught, so just kind of jiggle it a little bit and make sure that it kind of pops out, which is nice. Again, just kind of sitting inside of the box really nicely. Right here at the top, we have a magnetic dust filter. Just pop that out, pop that inside the box. Okay, last one. This is optional. I just do it to make the case a little bit lighter. Just right here from the bottom, just pull kind of hard, just pops right off. So now I have everything out. The last thing you're gonna do is right down here is actually the box for the screws. And you have to use your hands to loosen this little screw down here. Thing comes out. You're just gonna pull this off, just like that. It's up to you if you wanna put it back. I have a tendency to not put it back. I keep this out just so you have a lot of room down here. You could put it back if you're gonna install a hard drive. This is how you mount your 3.5 inch or 2.5 inch hard drives, but we're not gonna use it, so I'm gonna take it all the way out. Last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna push these through. This is actually fully zip tied. So grab your little zip tie clippers, and now all of your cables are out and ready to go. So next step, you're gonna take this, lay it on its back. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna stick the motherboard inside of the case. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna grab it. I use the cooler, it's okay. Don't put a lot of pressure. Most of my pressure is on my hand on the VRM. And then there's a little peg here in the center that's gonna line up with a center hole in the motherboard. So what I'm gonna do is just gonna lift it up. You're gonna see this little square in the back. Make sure the cables and stuff for the AIO and stuff don't get stuck. It's gonna kind of push it over, and then you're gonna get that peg right there in the center. And it's gonna lock in just like that. Now, something I love about the Phanteks XT is inside is this beautiful bag of accessories. And one thing that you'll notice, which, thank you Phanteks, I just gotta say, look at how many zip ties they actually give you, which is awesome. So those we'll actually end up using. Inside of the bag, and unfortunately it's not like some of the other Phanteks cases, but they give you one bag filled with all the screws. Now the good thing is that the motherboard screws are the most plentiful ones here, and there's about 20 of them in here, which you only actually need 9. So now guys, what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna screw in the screws for the motherboard, 3 in the top, 3 in the middle, 3 at the bottom. Sometimes you might find that you're getting a little resistance. Spin back and then spin forward just to make sure that you don't basically strip or cross thread. And then when you get to the end of the screw, you don't need to over tighten. Just when it stops is fine. Okay, now before we go any further, what we want to do is we want to take these cables right here and we want to pull them through to the back of the motherboard. So just being loose about it, there's a nice little hole right here at the top. And then once you've got it pulled through, you're gonna go ahead and zip tie right around this clump of cables. Okay, so let's go through what cables are included with the case. So as we talk about them, you'll essentially know what we're gonna plug in. Okay, so first one that we're gonna have, USB 3.2 connection. You'll notice it's blue on this one, and this is for the top connection, for the top USB-A at the top of the case. We have an integrated front panel connection. This makes it really, really easy. This is gonna go over our front panel header. After that, we actually have a USB-C connection. This is for the top USB-C connection at the top of the case, and this is gonna plug directly into the motherboard. Now, our added connections that we have as well is we have an HD audio connection, and then we have a case RGB, which will integrate into and basically daisy chain with our other RGB. Then we have all of our fan headers. are all connected because it's all connected to a fan header. So we have a single fan header, and that is all the ones that are with the case. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do before we route all our cables to the front is we're actually going to daisy chain our RGB for our case fans into the RGB for the air cooler fan. So at the very back is this little plastic bit, pull it off, and then what we're gonna see is, again, you have arrows on both of them. You're gonna literally line up the arrows. You're just gonna connect it just like that. Now we're ready to actually start routing all of our cables now that everything's basically ready to do. So first thing we're gonna start with is actually, weirdly enough, our RGB cable. And we're gonna route that in kind of a special way. There is, because this is what's called a back connect capable case, we're actually gonna route it underneath, and then it's gonna come over and out right up here. Okay, the second we're gonna do, our USB-C. So USB-C, we're gonna use that flat one. That's gonna go into this slot right here, which is really easy. Then since we're in that slot, we're gonna go ahead and grab the USB 3.2. Just make sure it's not twisted up. You're just gonna put that into the exact same hole, like that. Next thing what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab our HD audio connection. Again, just trying to make sure that none of this stuff is all twisted up, and it's gonna go right under here, down here at the bottom, like so. The next cable we're going to do is our integrated front panel cable. Gonna go right under here. Okay, we're gonna take both these fan connections and we're gonna route them into the first hole, making sure they're not twisted, right here. Okay, put them in the exact same place as our front panel. Okay, so once you have all of your cables routed, what I like to do is I'll grab these front panel and even in some regards the HD audio. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay the case down. So now I can connect all of the cables up. So first thing I'm gonna plug in is I'm literally gonna do the USB-C, and this is right over here on the right-hand side. If it doesn't go in nicely the first time, just twist it around, but it'll just pop in. Just like that. Then from there, we're now gonna plug in our USB 3.2. This is right next to our USB-C. You can see there's a little raised piece of plastic on here, and then you can see there's a little gap just going straight in. Boom. Next thing we're gonna plug in is we're gonna plug in our RGB for everything. And you see this little 3 white 5-volt RGB connection up here in the top right-hand corner. We're gonna start there. Okay, let's go down here to the bottom. Over here on the left of this large row of connectors is where we're gonna plug in our front panel connection right here. And then right next to it, we're gonna plug in our first of the 2 fan connections. And then we're gonna move over just a bit to plug in our second fan connection right here. Then we're gonna move all the way over to the left, and we're gonna plug in our last connection, which is our HD audio connection. There we go, guys. All of our connections are plugged in, and now becomes the therapeutic part where we're gonna do some cable management. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and cable manage it. And then once we're done, I'll walk you through what I did, so that way you can follow along and mirror what I did, whether you want to or not. So now I've got all of the cable management done. Really what it's about, a couple things. One, you'll notice down here at the bottom, it was just about making these as taut as possible. This section right here is really just about making these as tight as possible while bringing all of these other cables kind of into a nice spline. And then we have this pulling over, so it's just out of the way because we're gonna need that room for putting the PSU later. Here is all of our RGB. It's just about kind of making it into a nice little clump. And then the other thing too is notice that where I put the zip ties, it's about making sure that there's no pressure on any of the connections, so the connections stay tight and won't become disconnected. But the main thing is that if there ends up being a problem with any of the RGB, I just gotta snip these 2, see if anything's wrong, and then go from there. And these ones right here are just about cleaning it up. I'm kind of pushing this over. There's not a whole lot I can do because there's just not a lot of room to cable manage in. And then from there, it's just about making things look nice and clean when it's all said and done. Pretty straightforward, didn't take a whole lot of time for me to basically cable manage. We are almost done. We have all of our cables connected. We have all of our initial cables managed. And now it's time to look at this PSU. Now we have an 850 watt GF3 from Thermaltake that we're gonna be using. And this is gonna be more than enough power for all the way up to an RTX 5080 and greater, right? So we wanted to make sure that you have plenty of room to push this 9800X 3D, or if you did a 7600X or 7600, depending on what you've chosen, to basically push a GPU all the way up to an RTX 5080. So let's open this up. We'll see what's inside, talk about what you need, and then some alternatives if you end up choosing a AMD graphics card, for instance, versus an Nvidia graphics card. So let's get started. Now what we're gonna do is open this up. We're gonna grab our, which is in a nice little sleeve here. So we're just gonna pull that out. Just kind of put that back in the box. It's not something you really need. We're gonna take out our cables. Inside of our cable box is PSU screws, which we're gonna need, PSU cable, And then to go with your ever-growing connection of zip ties, you've got some more zip ties as well. And then lastly, you have your entire bag of PSU cables. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna choose the right PSU cables. What I like to do is just cut a little hole in them. Now for what we're gonna be showing here today is we're gonna need our CPU cable, and it's literally labeled CPU. If you're doing an AMD GPU, you're gonna grab the one that says PCIe and it's split on 2. If you're doing an Nvidia GPU, you're gonna grab this one that says 300 watts and it looks like a braided. And then the last cable you essentially need, your 24 pin. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do the peel on the PSU. First and foremost, we're gonna take our 24 pin. Basically, there's 2 sides. This one is a big, long 24 pin and the other one's split in 2. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take the part that's split in 2 and you're gonna plug it in where it says 24 pin ATX. Now the next cable we are for sure gonna use is the one that's labeled CPU. Part that is blank is what you're gonna plug into the PSU, and you'll see a place where it says CPU/PCIe. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take that blank side and you're gonna plug that in right like this. Okay, now comes an important thing. There are 2 different type of connectors depending on which GPU you're using. If your GPU, which in most cases is gonna be Nvidia, but there's actually even AMD that does this, where if you have a 16 pin, then you're gonna use this cable. Now, the way that essentially works is you'll see when it says 12 volt H power, make sure the little 300 watt is up. You're gonna plug that in right there. Now, if you're using an AMD or even some less powerful Nvidia cards, and it has 8 pin or it has 2 8 pins, what you do is you're gonna choose this cable, one side that's split that it literally says PCIe and the other side that's not. Then you're gonna take this cable and you're gonna plug this down where it says CPU/PCIe. So guys, we are almost at the end. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna be putting the PSU into the chassis and then routing the PSU cables so we can connect them up. You're gonna make sure that the bottom fan is pointing down. You're gonna push it in. It should go pretty easily here, and you're gonna push it all the way to the back like this. Then what you're gonna see is you're gonna see your 4 screws here, and they'll line up with the holes. Now, what you're gonna do for the screws is you're just going to put them in and get them started. Don't tighten them all the way down. The main reason we don't tighten them all the way down is because if you tighten them down, it will sometimes cause the PSU to shift, and then it will make it really hard for you to be able to get the other screws in. Once you get them kind of all started, you can then go ahead and tighten them all the way down, like so. And then last thing, we're gonna take this little peel right here, just go ahead and peel this off. Okay, so what we're gonna do next, guys, is we're gonna route all of our PSU cables to where they belong in the case, and then we're gonna connect them up, and then we're gonna get our GPU installed. So first and foremost, let's start with the 24 pin. It's gonna go right here. Next up, our CPU cable. This is basically gonna go plug in right up here in this top right-hand corner. And then if you're gonna be using an Nvidia GPU, we've got basically our 16 pin or 12+4 pin. That's gonna come in from the bottom, and it's got a dedicated hole. Now, if you're using an AMD GPU, grab your 2 PCI cables, or if you're using something more powerful, all 4. Okay guys, so now it's time for the GPU. You're almost done. This is the last component that needs to go into the build. We have 2 different variants here. First one is we have the Nvidia RTX 5070 Founders Edition, right, which is a little bit of a unique unboxing experience. And then here we have a more traditional graphics card, which is the AMD Radeon RX 9070 XT. Now, whether you get Nvidia or AMD, unless you're getting a Founders Edition, most of your unboxings will be actually very similar to this. But the main reason I wanted to show this is that we wanted to basically show you, because this will have some extra components that we'll kind of store away. That's why I wanted to do both of these unboxings on this video. So we'll start with the RTX 5070, and then we'll unbox the Radeon RX 9070 XT. For unboxing your Founders Edition, it's a pretty straightforward process. You're gonna lay it down. There's 2 little bins on the side that you're just gonna kind of pull out. It's gonna lift up, and then there is your GPU. Now, the thing that's actually really nice about the RTX 5070 is that it doesn't actually come with any connectors or plastic bits that you have to worry about hiding. And then there you can see we actually have that 16 pin connector we had talked about. And then for unboxing, that's it. That's all you have to worry about. Now for our Radeon RX 9070 XT. And then again, if you have what is considered a partner card, Nvidia card, so something from Gigabyte or Asus or whatever, this is actually gonna be pretty similar to your experience as well. But again, I wanted to open something a little bit more traditional there too. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna open it up, and then More than likely yours will open like this, just kind of open it up. Now, inside of this might all be different. A lot of these, some of them come with things like this. This is literally a little anti-sag bit. Yours may or may not come in this. This is just literally to add some extra support given how thick this card is. Sometimes they come with power connectors. We'll show using one of these, given that this is actually a 16-pin AMD card and not a 8-pin. But we'll show connecting the 8 pins so that way you see what the example is with this particular card. Now, one thing I would say, if you're ever going to ship your card or if you're ever going to ship your PC, definitely keep this plastic anti-static bag. Main reason being is that if you ever move this, it's better to take the GPU out and put it inside of the GPU box, so that way it just doesn't get jostled around, because it can put a lot of pressure on PCIe lane and all that sort of stuff, so it's just better to have this. So I always keep this. Cut that, open it up. Over there, just pull it open. Now, because this card is kind of thick, couple things that I'm going to do a little bit different, and what I like to put inside of the anti-static bag is I'll pull off this little piece of plastic here, and I'll pull off these plastic bits, and then what I like to do is I like to stick them inside of the anti-static bag so you don't lose them. Now, the last thing that you're going to have to do, and this is going to be, yours may or may not do that, is that look for the peels. You're going to want to make sure that you peel all the plastic off your GPU. Okay, so depending on which GPU you are putting in, whether that's a 5070 Founders Edition all the way up to a 9070 XT, or maybe you're using a 5080 Founders Edition or a big 5080 GPU, what you're gonna do is you're literally gonna look at the number of slots that your GPU is. So in this case, because there are 3 slots, we need to know that we are using a 3-slot GPU. So count the number of slots you have. Now what we're gonna do is you're gonna use a screwdriver or whatever it was, and then you're gonna take your by 16 lane, you're gonna follow it over, and then you're gonna count the number of slots. So in this case, we had 3, so 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna remove these 3 little covers. If you have 4, you're gonna go there. If you have 2, you're gonna go 1 less. One thing I'm gonna say is make sure that you save these little covers. Again, like if you end up shipping your system and then you end up taking your GPU out, it's just easier to kind of put them in there to protect the slots. So now what you're gonna do, you can see this gold pin, and this is the same on every GPU. And then you see this silver. This is your silver by 16. This is where you want to plug in your GPU, because this is the fastest lane on your motherboard. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your card, line it up. There's little places on the side here, and then of course the little gold pins will line up as well. Once you get it lined up, you'll hear a nice solid click once it's in. It'll be in on both sides. So it'll take a little bit of work. So if you feel like you're pushing really hard, it may be caught either on the side or on there, but you can see it just sits in there nicely once you're finished. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and screw it in. Okay guys, now the last segment is, depending on the type of connections, this uses a 16 pin. Like I said, some AMDs use it as well. We're gonna just plug this in. And the one thing is just make sure, if you're using one of these 16 pins, that it plugs all the way in. You hear a solid click, give it a lot of push. Now what you're seeing here is if you have an 8 pin or a number of 8 pins, we're showing you an image on green on how to plug those in, and it's just a rinse and repeat for the number of 8 pins you have. Okay, so now that that's done, what we're gonna do is just our last little bit of cable management, and then we get to turn this puppy on. So now that it's all cable managed, pretty straightforward. Sometimes one thing to do is I use these cables, like the big PSU cables, to kind of hide the sins that are underneath. Just wrapping this one around and then making it nice and neat underneath the actual PSU area, because you actually can see it a little bit if you wanted to. Again, cable management is completely optional. You can slam and cram, but the one thing I will say about cable management is it makes it a whole lot easier to kind of follow where cables go. And then if you're gonna do any mechanical work or troubleshoot, all that sort of stuff, it just makes it a little easier. And then it looks a whole lot cleaner, especially if you're spending, you know, up to $2,000 on a PC like this. So we're done. Let's get it up. Time for the last part, which is putting the case back together. We're gonna start with our front panel, just going towards the front. Let's line up the holes like so, and just give it a nice slap. There we go. Dust filter fell, so I'm just gonna pop that on real quick. This rear panel can be tricky. I find it to do a lot easier laying down, and then just pushing it even, and then giving it a push. Just does a better job. You have your screws, and there you go. Now, before I put on my front glass, what I have here is my handy dandy anti-sag bracket. The way this works is you loosen this, and then this comes up like so. what you want to do is you want to set it in here about the height that you think it's going to push up and set it right there. Okay, now we're going to take our glass. There's a little peel on the inside, so we're just going to So now what we're going to do, and you absolutely cannot peel the last glass until you have all of the power on and you're sure that it works, okay? It's just part of the karma of PC building. Twist these on. Now comes the moment of truth, folks. Plug this into the back here. Make sure you flip the switch on. 3, 2, 1. And there we go. And now that we know it's on, we can do our peel. And there you have it, a completed and beautiful gaming PC that is perfectly tailored to your needs. I am hoping that a lot of you at this point in the video are celebrating an awesome PC building experience along with me. Now, if you're here and your PC hasn't posted yet or it doesn't turn on, don't fret. Just go back and ensure that you plug in all the connections securely for your PSU and make sure that your front panel connector is secured all the way in. Now, if you want to get additional help, head on over to our Discord server, discord.gg/Robeytech. It's an amazing place to talk to other PC and tech enthusiasts that would love to help you figure out what's wrong with your build, and you know what? You might just make a friend. Now, if you're ready for that next step to get your PC up and running, check out our full guide on installing Windows 11 and getting everything set up on your PC, which you can actually check out that video right here. Now, to get a rundown on how this PC will do, potential upgrades, or if you just want to check out other step-by-step PC build guides and their performance, head on over to our website at robeytech.com/step-by-step. Now, congratulations first and foremost on following along, and hopefully you have your very own sweet gaming PC ready to do some serious gaming or video editing or something else. Now, if you completed your build, I would love to know down in the comments below, and make sure that you share those awesome PC build pics over at our Discord server. Oh, while you're down there in the comments, why don't you go ahead and smash that subscribe button, whip that like button, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss videos like this right here on youtube.com/Robeytech or our full live stream builds over at youtube.com/Robeytech Live. Thank you so much for watching this entire video, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.